NSFW. What's the most fucked up thing the US government has done? The CIA testing birth control on unsuspecting women in Puerto Rico, along with testing Agent Orange on the island, along with, actually using it in Vietnam. I mean, there was the time the National Guard shot and killed coal miners and their families who were being horribly exploited by coal companies, so they were striking. See also, the Ludlow Massacre and the time they decided to routinely sterilize Native American women, and the Guatemala Syphilis Experiments, and the Tuskegee Syphilis Experiments. WTF is it with syphilis? Cut it out, you guys. It's truly mind-boggling that we were doing syphilis experiments in the Tuskegee experiment from 1932 to 1972, and in the Guatemala experiments from 1946 to 1948. We were literally doing human disease experimentation after we shut down the concentration camps, where Joseph Mengele was doing human experimentation, and the US government really convinced themselves that it was completely reasonable to inject diagnose and purposely fail to treat a bunch of poor African Americans and Guatemalans with syphilis without their knowledge, so they could study it and develop treatment compare how untreated syphilis ended up compared to syphilis treated with penicillin. Back in the 50s and 60s, the US military tested several different biological weapons on, and unbeknownst to the public, they specifically targeted low-income and poverty-stricken areas. They tested things from chemicals to viruses. It wasn't declassified till 10 years ago. Edit. Sources. Edit 2. Why would they declassify it? Required them to disclose this. For years, so many people were arrested, disappeared, and even dismissed as conspiracy theorists through this. I can also say that chemtrails aren't a thing. I work aerospace, and the altitude that these planes are flying wouldn't do anything. Planes would be flying much lower like crop dusters in order to make any effect. It's literally vapor and exhaust coming from the planes, and some stay longer because of the different altitudes, temps and RH that they are flying. Edit 3. Since people are still arguing to me for chemtrails, here is the science that debunks it. Yup. St. Louis, San Fran, Atlanta, New York, and a few others. Currently, they are abusing the fact that the whole population is tunnel visioning on the corona pandemic to pass a highly controversial bill that will grant them access to every single phone call or message passed, sent, received on American soil, without warrant or court order. Edit. Okay guys, this comment official has gained 50 times more upvotes than my most upvoted post, and first award ever too. Cheat. Edit 2. Source found this helpful summary of the bill. Actual bill for those that can read law. Edit 3. Okay, who is the crackhead who gave me plat? And nobody knows about this. They honestly probably have access to everything we do anyway though. Wish more people cared about their privacy. Wiretap laws. PSSSSSHT. What's that? CIA and FBI. Along the lines, same ethics of the Japanese internment camps, but not as well known. Interesting. I had no idea that this even existed. That's pretty fucked up. You want this chronological or alphabetical? Doesn't matter. My printer doesn't have enough ink or paper to print the list out anyway. JSUT. This list is already insanely long. The involvement in various Latin American countries during the Cold War was pretty fucked up. Chiquita and Dole are still in business. WTF. That's bananas. The things they haven't been for. The MK Ultra stuff they leaked was the stuff that didn't work. MK Ultra is what I came to this thread to see. Anybody who has had a profoundly bad trip knows that testing large doses of LSD on random people without their knowledge is a really fucked up thing to do. Agent Orange depleted uranium arms that polluted battlefields and left generations of people with birth defects after the war was done. Beyond Agent Orange in and of itself, but even our own soldiers being told that it was relatively safe when the higher-ups knew it wasn't. moment. I had a good friend who struggled with 2 cancers and a chronic respiratory issue for 30 years, before succumbing to it about this time last year due to handling that stuff during Vietnam. My grandpa was a Vietnam vet and died from cancer. He was also exposed to Agent Orange, but we couldn't get the VA to do anything about it until after he died. My dad had early-stage lung cancer some years ago, but they fully removed it. He was exposed to multiple burn pits in Afghanistan and Iraq, never smoked, but once again the VA has dragged their feet and refuses to acknowledge his exposure. You'd think they'd treat a 25-year vet better. I'm sure that for every fucked up thing we know about, there are even worse things that we don't. Roswell, 1947. Let's say that myth about aliens anally probing us is purely projection. Maybe the government officials deserve to have a 10-foot pole shoved up there. The silencing, embarrassing, and killing of Gary Webb. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist who proved that the CIA was selling massive amounts of drugs to poor neighborhoods all over the U.S. This was in order to fund an overthrow of the Nicaraguan government by U.S.-friendly terrorists. During the 90s, he was forced to resign, disgraced, blacklisted, divorced, and found dead with 2 bullets through his head in 2004. It was ruled a suicide despite the facts he owned no guns, and it being 2 bullets through the head in a suicide. I was never even aware of this. This whole thread has me fucked up. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. I worked in a library years ago, and while I was putting books back, I read a spine with an interesting title. I picked up the book and started reading it. That is how I found out about Tuskegee. It was never mentioned in school. If I hadn't been reading spines, I literally wouldn't even know it was a thing. I got a degree in psych, and it's widely studied there. When talking about ethics in experimental design, Tuskegee, the Stanford Prison Experiment, and Little Albert are very commonly studied. Sandy Creek Massacre. 500 Colorado cavalry were sent to track down natives that were attacking settlers. They ended up coming to a Cheyenne village that was known to be peaceful. Its leader, Black Kettle, was a voice of peace for the natives and had even gone to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Lincoln and negotiate a lasting peace between Americans and Cheyenne. Lincoln gave him an American flag and told him that so long as it flew in their camp, no American would harm them. Anyways, this Chivington was leading the cavalry, and saw it as some kind of noble duty. After months of searching for aggressive natives and coming up empty-handed, the government ordered him to disband his force and go home. Chivington, now faced with the prospect of his crusade being an embarrassment, decided to attack Black Kettle's village, basically just to say he did something. The Colorado cavalry attacked in the middle of the night in mid-November, while everyone was sleeping. Eyewitness accounts are terrifying, and basically women, children, and men were run down as they tried desperately to flee across a frozen river. Black Kettle ran into the middle of the battle waving the American flag and screaming that they were friends of America, but the Americans turned on him and he was forced to drop the flag and flee as well. The fact that Black Kettle survived is miraculous, but most of his clan did not, and the few that survived the battle mostly died of hypothermia and starvation from literally fleeing through a frozen river in the middle of the night. Cavalrymen raped live and dead women, including children, and cut off male and female genitals and strapped them to their horses as decorations. Black Kettle and what remained of his clan ended up getting sent to a reservation, where they mostly starved to death, and Black Kettle gave up on peace as the younger generation flocked to warlords like Roman Nose and Crazy Horse. This ended up contributing to Red Cloud's War, as did most of the other atrocities in the West. Also Chivington was known to have said, "Nits make lice," a statement that referred to his campaign of exterminating native children along with everyone else. And I'm already sure Colorado nearly elected him governor after all of this anyways. The full quote was "kill them all, big and small, nits make lice." In case anyone was a Chivington sympathizer and wanted to say his words were taken out of context, they weren't. The full quote is, "Any man who sympathizes with Indians, I have come to kill Indians, and believe it is right and honorable to use any means under God's heaven to kill Indians." kill and scalp all, big and little, nits make lice. Well, this probably isn't the worst thing America has done since it didn't happen, but Operation Northwoods. This was a proposed false flag attack on U.S. soil that would justify going to war with Cuba. It was rejected by Kennedy, but approved by every man before him. It's stuff like this that makes the whole 9/11 inside job conspiracy sound a little less wacky, because this was essentially the same thing. Kennedy had a surprising number of those "WTF guys, no, we're not doing that" moments, which is surprising since he didn't even serve a full term as president. Although, that may be why he didn't serve a full term as president. The Dred Scott decision, involvement in the Vietnam War, Agent Orange, and slavery are the most fucked up that I can think of. Sent me a letter telling me that I had figured my taxes wrong. If they knew, why didn't they just do it for me? Because TurboTax lobbied to make it illegal for them to just do it for you, so that TurboTax can continue to exist as a rent-seeking leech on society. That's why I use Credit Karma. The Diego Garcia incident in the 1968, which is also one of the worst things the UK government has done. For the UK to continue purchasing nuclear missiles from America, they asked to rent out the British island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to use as a naval base. The UK then subsequently sent soldiers onto the island, forced all of the inhabitants off of the island, killed anybody who resisted, destroyed all homes and killed all the animals so US soldiers could then turn the island into a naval base. Any ex-inhabitants who tried to speak out about the incident were immediately silenced and punished, and the details of the incident were only recently made public. The island is still a joint UK-US naval base to this day. I had friends stationed there. I always wondered about it. Hard to rank them, but the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a U.S. false flag operation to establish the pretext to invade Vietnam to stop the spread of communism, leading to the absolutely useless deaths of millions of military and civilians, only to have the U.S. call out and cede control of the entire country to communist control. The most fucked up thing about it is that our government knew it was an unwinnable war, but we stayed there anyway. More bodies on the pile. The news media kept a daily running count of U.S. dead. The U.S. government measured success in terms of number of enemy dead. As a Brit, I'd never heard of this. After a quick read on Wikipedia, I can say that's a pretty messed up excuse to invade another country. And that's coming from a Brit. Now look up the Phoenix program, where the CIA kidnapped, tortured, and executed tens of thousands suspected VC for negligible strategic gain, or the illegal bombing campaigns into Cambodia and Laos. We attempted to bomb and back into the Stone Age, destabilizing Cambodia enough that the brutal Khmer Rouge took power, who we supported both legally and illegally after the war, as a final to Vietnam. Vietnam liberated them later. And a little off topic, but the CIA providing lists of leftists to the Indonesian government while they slaughtered millions, or arming both sides of the Iran-Iraq war. Iran so we could continue funding the war criminals extraordinaire, the Contras, and Iraq as a to Iran. We also provided Iraq with satellite intelligence, knowing that they'd use it for chemical weapons attacks. That last bit was official State Department work, not the CIA, or training the Salvadorian government soldiers in counterinsurgency tactics in the US, who then used them to slaughter the men, women, and children of El Mozote. We also pumped millions of dollars a day into the conflict, prolonging it, and destabilizing the country for decades, or the CIA teaching torture techniques to cops. I'm glad you're dead, Mitrione, or assisting in assassinating Allende and putting that monster Pinochet in power. Edit. I just want to say that I grew up in an area with a huge Latin American immigrant population, primarily Salvadoran, and had a lot of friends that were first and second generation, so these types of things hit close to home for me. So when people in the USA, why don't they just stay and fix their country? When the US started and exacerbated 90% of their issues, I get pissed.